Okay, I am back, and we're going to get into the beginnings of the Vietnam War, which really breaks out in the 1950s. So right around the same time that, with the Emmett Till murder with Brown v. Board of Education, a year before Rosa Parks, the Vietnamese, communists and Vietnamese, influenced by guess who? China, are going to take over. So where's Vietnam? It is here. It is this area right there. And once again, just like with Korea, we have a north-south situation going on, where the north, again, which borders China, is controlled by communist forces, and the south is friendly with the United States, democracy, capitalist democracy. Although actually it wasn't a democracy at that point, it was more of a dictatorship, but it wasn't a communist one. So the United States foreign policy was like, dictator, okay, what kind? Communist, can't have it. Any other kind? All right, just don't be a communist. Especially that stuff happened a lot in Latin America. But in Vietnam, so Vietnam used to be a French colony, and the Communist Army overthrew the French and kicked them out in 1954. They were led by a man named Ho Chi Minh, and he's just like so many parallels to Korea. Then they just go through the country and they want to take the whole thing over. The United States eventually intervenes based on this thing called the domino theory. So if you look at the bottom picture there, you see all these countries getting knocked over. So remember, the Soviet Union was communist. They border China. China becomes communist. China borders Korea. Korea becomes communist. China borders Vietnam. Vietnam becomes communist, and then it's going to spread and spread and spread and spread and spread. And so the United States eventually gets involved in Vietnam to varying levels to stop the spread of communism, because if they say if it doesn't stop here, it's never going to stop. It's like a disease. So at the Geneva conference after this, French overthrow, Geneva's in Switzerland, they agree to split Vietnam in half. Of course, North Vietnam doesn't. They're like, okay, and then they go and attack South Vietnam. One of the things that they did was use this thing. So in green on the map there, it's called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They would cross the border into Laos and into Cambodia, and not, because Vietnam's really thin. So if the if the South Vietnamese set up like a blockade, like right here, it would be tough to get through. So they just went around it. They went into other countries and went around it, and would attack from all these different villages. Eisenhower, president at the time, he's seen more. Again, he ends the Korean War eventually. He doesn't want to get the U.S. involved in another war. So what he's going to do in Vietnam is send economic aid, send them money, sort of like Marshall Plan stuff, except military. So then they're going to send like military personnel to train the South Vietnamese army. But these guys aren't supposed to fight. They're going to send modern weapons over there, stuff like that, so that the South Vietnamese can, for themselves, fight against the North Vietnamese. This was Eisenhower's his playbook. Kennedy's going to do the same thing, but then we're going to see after Kennedy's assassinated, the next president, Lyndon Johnson, he goes all in on Vietnam. But we're not there yet. But this is sort of like where everything gets started. All right, let's talk about Eisenhower a little bit. So, what do we know about his career before becoming president? What was his attitude towards... Okay, so what we know about his career, he was, the World War II famous general of D-Day. His attitude of integration of schools in the South. Remember, he wanted it to happen. He was slow. He's dealing with all this other stuff too. Eventually, he sends the troops down to Little Rock, but he was very hesitant because he thought he would start a second civil war, by sending troops to the South. It would be like, the last president to do that would have been Abraham Lincoln. His attitude toward involvement in Vietnam, doesn't want to get big into war. He's seen war, he's seen death. He wants to do everything possible to not get involved. The space race. Again, we talked a couple videos ago, we talked about how the rocket technology that would launch something into space was the same kind of technology that could launch nuclear missiles across the planet. So the space race and nuclear arms race go hand in hand with each other. And again, it's like, who can do what first? Whose technology can be more advanced? The Russians won basically everything, but then the Americans landed a man on the moon and were like, haha, beat you. But for most of the other main events, the Russians did it first. And they developed this thing called Sputnik, which is a satellite, and this is kind of like a model of it. And it would orbit the Earth, and it was the first thing to successfully be sent into space that like really worked. Americans freaked out. This is 1957. By showing off this technology, the United States now knows that the Soviets have the technology to launch a nuclear bomb from Russia and maybe hit the United States, or they're going to get there with this technology. If you can go into space, you can go across the world. And again, I mentioned this term before, but it's called an intercontinental ballistic missile. That launched Sputnik was a satellite, but if you put a nuclear warhead on one of those things, then it becomes the most destructive weapon in the world. So people are freaking out in the 50s because the Russians won the first thing. And it was even to the point where people would go outside because you could see it at night, and like, I don't know when, but it was timed, so you knew exactly when it was going to pass over, and you could see this one satellite. We have a bajillion satellites out there right now. In fact, the way you're able to use Wi-Fi or GPS is based on that. But when there was just one satellite in the sky, it was really easy to point out. So a year after this, Eisenhower creates NASA, and this is to compete with the Soviets. First of all, for space exploration, and second of all, to really ramp up this rocket development. Another thing in the 50s, we have 2 new states. Goes from 48 states, then Alaska is the 49th state, and Hawaii is the 50th state. And these are both welcomed into the country in 1959. JFK wins the presidency. Okay, we went over the Nixon-Kennedy debates during the Civil Rights Movement. So I'm going to skip through this one right here. But get into the politics of the anti-Catholic... You know what? New video. I can't make these ones too long. Sorry for the abrupt ending there.